but right now we are going to jump on over to the main stage, and this is the World of Warcraft Dungeons and Raids panel. Cory Stockton on stage.
Listen, something else to do in these dungeons. We've got so many awesome dungeons, and there's lots of different ways to play them, but some people are looking for a greater challenge in them. Maybe they want to try to do something different, and so we're just looking to give players an opportunity of a different thing to do. And it works great to do it within the dungeons because we have so much content there to come up with a new mode for players to play them in. Essentially, what a challenge mode is doing a dungeon on a timed run. So similar to the runs we used to have back in the day, where people could go in and do a timed run specifically on a Stratholme is a great example of the 45-minute Baron run, something like that. But we wanted to take that and just turn that into a whole entire mode where that's what the whole concept is. So you're going to be able to go into a dungeon, timer starts, and then see how quick you can finish it. And then we'll have specific times set up that would give you a bronze, silver, and a gold medal. And depending on how quick you can finish it, you can earn that medal. And that would work for all the dungeons across the board. We're liking to do as many as we can. We're going to obviously start with Pandaria, and then if there's dungeons that it would work, obviously Skullomance could be one that this could work with, or Scarlet Monastery. But we're going to start with the Pandaria dungeons. So it really gives people something they could do with their guildies, they could do it with friends, but we also want to have it work through the Dungeon Finder tool. So we're looking into just having an option to queue specifically for challenge mode, and you would only queue in with other people that want to do this mode. Another huge note about challenge mode is that we're using normalized gear. It's a huge deal here. So essentially everyone that's in here is going to have the exact same item level of their gear. So it really means that it's a skill-based exercise and not just based on how good your gear is. And it's really great because it means this content's going to last for so much longer because we can normalize that gear. So later on, you might have some raid gear and come back and try to do a dungeon and think you're going to blow it out of the water, but you're actually going to be on the exact same playing field as another guy who might just have, heroic gear rather than raid gear. Now, what we're talking about for the rewards for this is really, really awesome looking gear that you can use for transmog. Obviously, we're saying you're going to get Valor for doing this. Like, part of our philosophy is that people should be able to do whatever they want to advance their character. So, you'll be able to do challenge modes if you like that and still earn Valor. But we really love the idea of getting unique art for this that, you can show off. A big part of this is bragging rights and leaderboards. So, if you can only get that gear here, you can transmog your tier 14 shoulders into the gear that you got specifically out of challenge mode. Now, like I mentioned, leaderboards will be a huge part of this. The concept that you could take, your time and compare it against your BattleNet friends list, or you could take your time and compare it specifically against your guildies, and find out who got through which dungeon the fastest, what medals have you earned. There's a number of ways that you can compare to other people. You can look at their gear and know right away if they've been able to get the gold medal in this specific dungeon. So we've got a couple mock-ups of what the UI is going to look like for this. So on the left there, you can see the challenges screen, and you can see the gold, silvers, and bronze medals that a guy has gotten. You can see what his best time is in a dungeon. You can see who he ran it with. There's a lot of different things of information you can get out of this one screen. On the right side, that's a leaderboard. So you can imagine that being in the guild system where you have the drop down and you can pick to compare by achievement points or by different things, by your guild XP. There's going to be an option to compare by challenge mode. And then you can see, who's gone up in the leaderboard. That's what the little green arrow is. And you can see the gold medal or the silver medal that they earned for that specific run. This is a look at what would happen when you finish the dungeon. Same thing in the roster. If you click one specific guy, you could see, what has he done? What is his profile? Kind of just like looking at inspecting someone and finding out, what's the fastest time they've got? What dungeon are they the best at? And then maybe you guys could decide that you want to get together and run another dungeon the same way. This is just a mock-up of one of the big things about this is when you succeed really well, we really want you to feel awesome. So the guys mocked up something like this. Imagine you win, you get an awesome background sound, and you get this super cool screen telling you that you just did, you got the gold medal, you beat this dungeon as much as you can. Now take this group and maybe try to hit another dungeon and see if you can get that gold medal somewhere else. And next up, raids.
All right. So raids in Mr. Pandaria. We're going to have 3 of them. We really liked how the Cataclysm raids on ship worked, where you had 2 raids of around 5 to 6 bosses and a third one with a couple bosses. It really, we got multiple end bosses out of that. We got, multiple times during a week you would get that really nice, exhilarating feeling of, yeah, I beat this entire raid. So we really like that, and we're going to go with that kind of philosophy again. The raids are going to feature predominantly 2 of our new enemy races, the Mogu and the Mantid. And we have some screenshots of what they're going to look like. Oh, in a little bit. And also, all of these raids are going to have Raid Finder, Normal, and Heroic difficulties. We'll talk about Raid Finder a little bit more in depth, but Raid Finder is the new difficulty that we're adding in 4.3 for Dragon Soul. It will be in every single raid in Mist of Pandaria as well. So here's one of the Mantid. This is an early look at what they might look like. And again, there will be different types of Mantid. We're talking about Mantids with wings, much larger Mantid that would act as tanks. And then we have a look at the Mogu. These really huge, beefy guys, but also very mystical. They're a very magical race. So the first raid we're going to look at here would be Mogushan Palace. It's located at the top Kunlai summits, which is in the center of Pandaria, and it's our 6th boss raid. And inside that, you'll actually go in and explore the hidden secrets of the ancient Mogu Empire. Mogushan Palace has actually been locked away. Most of its secrets, even the Pandarians, don't go into this place. It's all been locked away. The Mogu have. The Mogu Empire was actually before the Pandarian Empire. It's very ancient, lots of old secrets. You'll go in there and discover all of them. So here we'll show you a layout that's actually already changed. We're iterating all the time, folks. So you can see this is actually a boss. This is a layout that actually has 5 bosses. You would start on the right, head over to the left, go down. And while we don't have like a really cool video to show because it's still in production, we do have some awesome concepts to show off for you. This is one of the rooms where you go along. This is actually, we'll have a boss probably in front of this right here. This is this crazy library where these huge scrolls are along the wall, with ancient Mogu scripts. You can see over in the far bottom right corner, you can actually see like the scale of what you would look like. So this place is huge. I have this another like beautiful concept of this entryway, this grand entrance into the temple, and it's just gorgeous. We're really looking forward to spawning, making creatures for this, really giving you guys a lot of fun with the raids. So Raid Finder.
So what is Raid Finder? We've talked a lot about Raid Finder for patch 4.3, but we thought we'd give you guys a little bit more details since we're here talking specifically on dungeons and raids. Essentially, the concept came up from what we did with Dungeon Finder and being able to see how successful that's been with getting a lot more players into the dungeon content that we build. What we've found with raids, though, is that we aren't seeing as wide of an audience as we would like in our raid content. We spend a lot of time on the raid content, and it's also just got some of our coolest fights, some of our best creatures, and we really feel like everyone should have a chance to see that content. That's one of the main reasons we decided to get it in with patch 4.3 instead of waiting until Mist of Pandaria, because being able to fight Deathwing in the Dragon Soul raid, we just thought, what better place to put it in so that as many people as possible could get a chance to experience that fight and be able to finally put down Deathwing for good. Now, what we're doing with it specifically is a lower difficulty level than normal difficulty. And that doesn't mean that we're just going to go in and tune the hit points down a little bit, and we're going to go in and tune their damage down, 20 or 30%. Instead, we're actually going to go in and look at the mechanics, see how complicated they feel, talk about could a group of 25 people that haven't played together before be able to figure this out and actually build something that works for them. If we took the shortcut route about just, literally just changing numbers, that's still not going to tune down the complexity of the fight. Yes, it might make it easier, but you're not going to know why you beat it. You're not going to actually pick up on those mechanics. So we're actually going to go in and make sure that these fights feel right for this difficulty level. Like I mentioned, this is going to be in patch 4.3 with Dragon Soul, but in 5.0, Mist of Pandaria, it's actually going to be for every single dungeon on launch. So it's really going to be cool because starting out early on in the expansion, so many people are going to have more access to more content. You're not necessarily going to be done when you finish, heroic dungeons, and maybe you've done challenge modes, and now you feel like you're ready, but you don't necessarily have a group to raid with. Being able to use Raid Finder is a way to get in really quickly. Now, on the opposite side for Raid Finder, we've also made sure that the loot and the rewards that you get from it feel appropriate to that level of player that's doing it. So for instance, you're not going to be able to get vanity items out of the normal Raid Finder, things like mounts that would drop off the final boss. We keep those in normal or heroic. Things like achievements for specific bosses are going to end up staying in the normal and heroic. We will have an achievement that says you've done Raid Finder, but that would probably be it. And then all the rest of our achievements would end up staying in the normal and heroic modes. So that, there's a lot of people that play those modes and they take a lot of pride in the fact that they can finish that content. And we think that's awesome. We want that to still exist. But we also want to be able to open that content up to more people, and that's where Raid Finder slots in. So we've got a couple mock-ups of how this would look. We've been talking a lot about how to get people more motivated to do raids. So we thought, along with Valor Points, a side of fries would be sweet.
So tasty.
So this is just, it's going to look very much like Dungeon Finder that you see now. You're going to be able to open it up, pick your role, and queue up for it. And one really important point about Raid Finder is that it works for 25-player raids, not for 10-player. And we did that specifically because it's going to be so much better queue times if we do 25, because we can fill it with 17 DPS versus in a 10-man where we use a much smaller number, and the queue times would just be way bigger. So 25-player raids end up working much better for Raid Finder than 10-player. And now Scott's going to hit on some of the goals we have for the expansion as a whole.
Okay. So one of the things we're really trying to do with Mist of Pandaria this time is keep the experiences short and focused. A few of the dungeons in Cataclysm actually got away from us. Hall's Origination had 7 bosses. That takes a while to get through. Dead Mines had 6 bosses. That took a long time to get through. We actually had to go back in and hotfix some of the trash out to try to keep it a bit more focused. Because again, we want you to be able to not just like make it so where at the end, for a night you're like, oh, I'll do a dungeon. These things should be short enough so you actually like want to do a couple dungeons, or a dungeon plus some dailies, a dungeon plus some pet battles, a dungeon plus some battlegrounds. Trying to keep these short and focused will give you more opportunity to do more things inside our game, and we think that's very, very important. Another one that we'll talk about together is need to make the encounters understandable so we don't set up groups to fail. We released Dungeon Journal. One of the main reasons for that was trying to make it so where you get into a group, you're going along, you like get into a boss fight, all of a sudden you're all dead, and you're like, what just happened? And then the healer gets blamed, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I guess I can look in Dungeon Journal and see what's happening there. The Dungeon Journal is great for that, but what we really need to do as designers make sure is that visually you understand what's going on, that we telegraph these abilities so you aren't, out of the blue hit by something really deadly. It's something we're really going to try to focus on, making all of the encounters super understandable. Because I just mentioned like how bad it was if you don't understand like why you all died or why you all failed. It's almost just as bad if you go into an encounter, go in, everyone goes, all right, we just got this, and you go in, you fight, and you win, you're like, well, what just happened? I don't know, but we won. Okay, that's pretty bad too, because that means you didn't actually like understand what the game mechanics were. There wasn't any enough gameplay there. We put in abilities that, hey, if there's a big damage spike for a tank, use your shield wall type ability. Things like that. If you can just ignore those kinds of things, then, and if you don't understand them, that makes for not as much fun. And that's what we're really trying to hit for, is upping the fun quotient of the dungeons. Another thing we're really like talking about is flexing our creative kung fu. This expansion is awesome for us. Over the last few expansions, we've had these really heavy dark themes when you think about it. Like, you've gone up to Northrend, to stop the Scourge and the Lich King. The Cataclysm just happened, and now you're killing Deathwing in 4.3. Here in Mist of Pandaria, you saw one of the dungeons earlier, you're trying to make sure the beer doesn't stop. This is amazing. It's a little bit more lighthearted, it's a little bit more friendly, and also it allows us to, there's all these cultures and things. We're all like super geeks, kung fu movies, Asian culture, anime, all these things that, all of a sudden it's like, we can dragon punch people and wow? Awesome.
We can.
So you'll get dragon punched and all other kinds of like crazy moves, you know, flying guillotines, I'm sure, you know, all kinds of new stuff. It's really exciting us as designers to work on this. And I think you'll really see when you guys finally get your hands on this, all that, you know, tender loving care. And another like interesting thing, so the 3 dungeons you've seen before, something that's actually really cool about them that we're doing with these is they're actually in the world at a 1-to-1 scale. A lot of our dungeons are actually just holes in the wall, and then behind that hole, like time and space sort of changes, and if you if you actually walk the same distance inside the dungeon that you walked outside, you'd go through a mountain or something. These places are all actually in the world, which opens up a ton of really cool things. Our quest designers are super excited about, you know, being able to send you into these dungeons. And you can see here, like this is the J Temple. Again, that's actually in the world. It's gorgeous. We're giving you a chance to see it. Like Cory was talking about, the indoor-outdoor dungeons really feel amazing. Again, going to that more lighthearted feel. Like if you can see the sun, that's amazing. You know, some of our dungeons before have been very dark, very heavy themes, while so many of these are, you know, just gorgeous. So now, thanks for listening. Of course, we would not be here without all of you. And now it's our time to listen to you guys. So we'll go to the Q&A.
Time for Q&A.
There's a line happening somewhere there.
I think it's here. There it is.
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Okay, so we don't have anybody here to help us. So you guys, we're going to take a line right here. Jesse, who's got his hand up here, is going to beginning of the line. We're taking questions about dungeons and raids. So if we have somebody already, come on up. Are you ready? Let's go.
Let's do this.
We almost have a whole half hour.
Who do we got? Come on up. Come on up, stand right here.
The challenge modes, you said gear would scale with when you're in there. Does it scale up as well as down?
Currently, we're planning for it to scale down. Although we have talked about possibly, instead of doing that, we could also just scale all of the monsters' power up. So instead of, because we've been worried that maybe just scaling the gear down might make people feel less powerful because it's going down. So an alternative to that would be just scaling all the monsters up and then having the gear level be higher. So there's still a little bit of give and take on that.
No problem. Next one. Who's got one? There you go. Step up. There we go. This guy's ready.
Regarding the Dungeon Finder and Raid Finder,
Right.
are we going to be able to enter a random queue for possibly like Burning Crusade raids and Wrath of the Lich King and stuff like that?
Currently,
Yeah, currently we've talked about it a little bit. One of the things we're concerned about is there actually going to be enough people to fill that queue? How many people, like, if a lot of people, like when they go back into those old raids, it's specifically because they're like looking for transmog gear now. They're trying to get achievements with their friends, with their guilds or whatever. So we're not sure if necessarily like random raid or Raid Finder is a fit for those kinds of cases. We'll see, like Raid Finder, certainly like once we like really, you know, debut it in 4.3, see how it works, improve it for 5.0, you know, in the future we certainly could do that kind of thing.
yeah, it's not off the table. It's just a question of would we have enough people in the queue to make it work?
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Hey,
You were talking about how the dungeons are now visible in the outside world, but as far as I remember, in Burning Crusade there were a lot of examples where they were. Why did you decide to actually forget about it in this expansion, but actually are going back to it? What made you forget?
over time, we've had dungeons that have existed in the outdoor world before. You could imagine players that went to Scarlet Monastery had always seen it in the world. It's just one of those things that we didn't focus on all the time. And there's a secondary thing to it. that you're not really going to see until you're actually playing. But for example, the Storm Stout Brewery, since it exists in the outdoor world, the quest guys have actually quested up all the area around it, but they're also using the dungeon itself for quests on the inside. So there's actually some quests where you can actually go inside the dungeon and have to fight, see some of the bosses that you're going to fight in the dungeon, but you interact with them on a quest basis solo. So it's really opened up a lot of new gameplay opportunities for the quest guys, as well as just the fact that it really has a sense of place in the world.
Yeah, and there have been a few that have been like that. You know, Zul'Farrak was one like that. But when you actually see the scale of these inside the game, it's really super impressive. They make, they really make the zones come alive. Seeing this, really huge focal point for.
Historically, we've had to scale them to be smaller. So here they're at a 1-to-1 scale, so they actually have an awesome impact on the zones.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Come on up.
Hi. Given the increased focus on doing multiple things, are we going to be able to do quests in a raid group?
That's a great question. I mean, really, there's not a lot of reasons why we don't allow that, other than the fact that we don't want a large number of people able to beat certain quest mechanics. But now with the advent of scenarios and the fact that our group quests might end up moving towards scenarios, it might not be as much of an issue.
I think we might be pulling that for 4.3.
Yeah.
I'll have to check. We talked about that recently.
Yeah, it's definitely been talked about.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, come on up. Say Blues Brother.
That's right. I have a question about the kick process. Usually in some groups, you try to kick somebody for being stupid, and it says a 3-hour wait period. When most 5-mans are 10 and 20 minutes long, or maybe an hour long.
We have an internal algorithm, I guess you could call it, that works for our kicking, and it actually keeps track of the number of times you've kicked someone, how long, how many times that person has been kicked, and it actually modifies that number dynamically based on kind of the history of your kicking. So we can kind of know, are you excessively kicking people for no reason, or are you the kind of person that, you come across someone occasionally and then they'll get kicked right away. But that's essentially what you're seeing, is that algorithm working, trying to help the fact that, someone doesn't get kicked that doesn't necessarily deserve it. That's essentially, we're just trying to have that system feel as best as we can. Because we want to allow people to kick, but we don't want people to be kicked for no reason.
Yeah, we want people to be kicked.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, we want people to be kicked for the right reason and not for the lulls.
Mm-hmm.
All right, come on up.
At the Cataclysm Lost, you talked about having the 3 raids as well and like 13 bosses in the tier, and you're talking about doing that for Miss Pandaria as well. Yeah. But then in the later patches of Cataclysm, like 4.2 and 4.3, you're down to 7 and 8 bosses respectively. Is that just the nature of patches, or do you plan on having bigger tiers in the patches of Pandaria as well?
We haven't actually figured out, we haven't finalized what the tier plan will be for all the launch raids. For example, we don't know if we're going to have 2 tiers and split those up, or if they're actually going to be combined into 1 tier. A lot of that comes into how we're going to actually, get loot to the players. A lot of what we're talking about here today is that there's so many other ways to get loot, so we have to make sure that the loot we give out in the raids matches up with all the other ways that we're allowing you to get items in the game. So a lot of that's just, we still haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In Cataclysm, there was a very steep jump in difficulty between level 85 normals and 85 heroics, which was great, but the side effect of that was that at the 85 normals, there was only the 2, 3 that you end up running over and over and over again, and it was quickly tiresome. How are you going to handle that for Pandarian? Will there be more level 90 normals, or the sort of same 2, 3, then jump to the heroics?
We're currently not planning to have level 90 normal dungeons at all in Mists of Pandaria. We're planning to have the level up dungeons, and then heroics, and then challenge modes is the way you would see that flowing, as far as like if your progression of content. And because of challenge modes, the normal and our heroics would be at a little bit of a lower difficulty level than what you saw in Cataclysm, because people that are looking for that extra level of difficulty could do the challenge modes.
Yeah, it's as you noted, like, there wasn't really enough content to support a full tier with level 85 normals. and looking at Mr. Pandaria, we didn't feel like there was, we'd rather like spend our time working on the heroics, making that tier like super awesome, making the level ups really amazing, and just, we ended up, we couldn't really make that one super awesome, so we just decided to cut it.
They're in this weird middle ground, so it's hard to make them feel as awesome as a heroic or a level up.
Right side of the road, okay. Left side of the road, okay. In the middle, squish like great. That's what happened with those normals.
Thank you. All right, come on.
Hi, my question's about hard mode toggling. Ulduar was the first hard mode. You guys said that was cool, but you had to go to the internet to figure out how to push a button and make Memoron mad. You went to on-off toggle. Last year you guys said you didn't like it, had to go to the internet, but now the Dungeons rules in. Can we go back to maybe having Sartharian bring drakes, or leaving the trees up in Freya's room activate additional abilities? That was kind of more fun than turn on hard mode, have more health, do more damage.
That's something, those were, like you said, those were really fun. The idea that you could sort of like choose, effectively multiple difficulties for the fight, I think was pretty compelling. But as you noted, in the end, it was very difficult to come up with that kind of mechanic for every single boss. Like, it worked out great with Freya because she had, the sub-bosses with her. It worked out great with, the Iron Council because there was 3 of them, and which order it made sense, well, which order you did it in. But then you had bosses, and Mimiron was awesome. Like, if we could do another boss where a big red button made him angry, I'm totally down for that. Big red buttons, total win in my book. But there was others, the Frost one where it was very hidden. It was like, did you do it in time? Okay. And that's really all there was to it. So we really like, we can make these more consistent with with a toggle, with a normal heroic toggle. It makes it more understandable to the players. There's a lot of weirdness that went on where it's like, oh, we're gonna try for normal, but they're like, oh, we kind of screwed up, so let's like stop this. We're not. So it's much clearer, and that's what I think. When we're talking about the goals, making things understandable is a very important thing for all players.
Thank you.
My question is about the legendary items. Right now, you guys currently randomly choose the legendary to a class that hasn't gotten one for a while. But why can't you make a universal legendary quest chain that guilds can give the item to the most dedicated raider that deserves it at the time? So one guild may give it to their healer, another guild may give it to their tank or melee DPS, but they all have different abilities.
We could do something like that, but I think you lose the luster of the fact that anyone could get it at that point. What we like about what we have now is you build a lot of build-up around that one legendary. Like, rogues are about to get the next legendary now. And they've been waiting a long time to get their legendary, right? And we can design, what's really cool about it is the quest line to get it has all this specific rogue gameplay. You're sneaking around, you're pickpocketing, you're using rogue abilities all over the place specifically for it. So I think for us, it really feels like making sure that it's for one specific type of gameplay, like a class, makes it really feel right. And so that's what we did here. I mean, we could definitely open it up, but I think it would lose some of that luster, some of that exclusivity.
Yeah, you want unique and awesome or generic and mushy. We go with unique and awesome.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's a cool idea, though.
The 1025 lockout has been frustrating for me because it's basically made my alt spec a dead spec for current tier. I know the raid finder is going to help and give me something to do, so if I have a main spec of a tank, my alt spec is healer, I can't do the same current content as a healer. The raid finder, can we join that as a group with our guild, and is the content going to be satisfying enough?
You can definitely join as a group in raid finder, and I believe we have no lockout on.
Yeah,
we have no lockout on raid finder.
There's no lockout, but you can only get loot once a week per boss, so it's a little bit different. But you can totally do your normal mode or heroic mode raid, and with the same character go into raid finder and get loot from there and have a fun time. As far as will it be satisfying for you? we're trying to make all of the encounters, super fun, regardless of which difficulty you're playing it at. So I think there'll be something regardless of what difficulty you.
And just the general concept of 1025 and having the lockout be unified is something we always talk about. I mean, when we made that change originally, and so we've still got a ways to go, but we're always trying to figure out what's going to work best for the players at this time. So that's not completely out of the picture.
Right.
So it might go back.
You never know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right up, right there.
Hi, I was wondering about just like for Cataclysm, there was like 3 raids that came in like straight from the expansion, and right after that we had Firelands, and it was only like 7 bosses compared to the 12 we had before, or 13 if you want to do heroic. But so I was just wondering, like, have you guys thought about maybe like some way to make it seem like this so it's not overwhelming in like the initial part of it with 3 raid dungeons and then just 7 bosses in there? That seems a little like you're too focused on one raid for a long period of time, and one, it's like 2 sides of a spectrum. Is there going to be like a middle in the next expansion or something?
Right now, we're talking about having 6, 5, and 5, I think.
6, 5, and 2.
Yeah, 6, 5, and 2. So something pretty similar, like 14 bosses on launch in the same way. But we're still not sure how many of the world raid bosses we want to do that are going to be in the exterior world. So we're going to have raid bosses like that as well. But definitely we want that to not feel like it's such a big jump, all the time, where maybe one time you get 7, then you get 13, then you get 5. Essentially, the number of bosses comes down to we need to have enough bosses to distribute loot correctly. There's kind of a minimum number we have to make sure that we can spread the loot around. But other than that, I mean, it just comes down to the time of us being able to get a patch out with the number of bosses that we think feels right for that zone.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, hi, I would like to ask a question about the classic dungeons to see if there was ever going to be another one, kind of like heroic stockades, like Hogger. Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
It might be like in the future, like via patch, we might do more classics, like we did Zul'Aman, Zul'Gurub, and patches. They're a lot of fun to do for us. I mean, they're really well received by the community.
We love doing those.
Right. Everyone loves Hogger. So, we'll see.
I mean, a cool fact, actually, originally, Dead Mines and Shadowfang Keep were supposed to be for patch 4.1. They weren't even originally in launch. And all of us on the dev team thought it was so awesome.
Yeah.
We were just like, no, we've got to get these in for launch because they're just too cool. So I think it just, that's the kind of thing whenever we have time, if we can get one in and it feels like it's going to fit, it's something we want to do.
Thank you.
Hello. So when you guys announced 4.3, you announced that there was only going to be 7 bosses, but that you were going to focus a lot more on making sure that the bosses felt more epic and more, that you put more work into them.
Right.
And I know this is just my opinion, but I didn't really feel like the bosses were anything special. And so when it came down to it, Firelands really only felt like half a raid. And then with the 4.3 is already on the test realms, it felt like you guys kind of felt like we need to push this next patch out right away, so let's nerf all these bosses so guilds can get through it and we can push out the next patch. And I didn't really like that, so I was just wondering, is this something we can expect to see in the next, raid tiering in Miss Pandaria?
That's certainly not the reason why those bosses were nerfed at all. It doesn't have anything to do with timeline. It has everything to do with we want as many people as possible to experience that content. So we were looking at the number of people that were getting kills on the raid bosses, and it was extremely small. And for all the work that everyone puts into something like that, that's why we did the hot fixes right away instead of waiting, because we want to get that content to as many people as possible. And that's definitely why you saw that. So really the issue there is us probably over-tuning those bosses to begin with, and that might come off a different way, but it's certainly not about us trying to rush and get to the next content and making sure guilds are ready.
Yeah, and the 4.3 raids, the Death of the Wing stuff, extremely epic. It'll be, you guys haven't seen the Corrupted Deathwing fight on PTR yet, but when you guys do, you'll be blown away.
Thank you. That's what. Oh.
Thank you for making a fantastic game.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, come on up.
For competitive raiders, have you thought about separating the difference between 10 and 25? Since there's a difficulty difference, and the way that it's set up for server first achievements?
We've discussed it.
Yeah.
That's certainly something. There are some differences between 10 and 25, like difficulties on heroic. It depends on, for some raids, the 10s were harder. Like some of the initial, Cataclysm raids. Some of those 10 heroics were really, really hard. And vice versa. In Firelands, the 25 ones ended up being harder. It's hard for us to. It's difficult to actually keep those perfectly balanced. There's usually one that's a little bit easier than others. So that's something we've talked about, and can't make any promises, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so you were talking how challenge modes can be done for dungeons. Are they also going to be for raids? And also, are they all going to be unlocked immediately? Or is it going to be like you have to do 10 to unlock the next tier and then 15 to do the next tier, things like that?
There's a chance we could do them for raids. We want to start with dungeons and see how they work out and see if they're popular and get a chance to tune them and have them feel right. Raids aren't out of the picture. As far as the unlocking, there's one thing we didn't really mention, but we've been talking about, once you get, say you get the gold medal, right? After that, we've talked about then actually the item level of your gear could get nerfed by, say 5%. And then you could have a chance to run it again, almost like a prestige mode kind of thing, right? And if you beat that, then we could drop your gear by 10% and then 15%. So not only would there just be those 3 levels, you could kind of keep going depending on your skill level. That's another way that we could possibly unlock so you could do more. We just kind of haven't finalized that yet, to be honest.
Thank you.
I feel like one of the strengths of being able to have 2 raids on a single tier usually comes with giving the raiders a choice as to how they will progress through content. Right. Like they can choose, we want to focus on this string of bosses to get to the end at the beginning of this week, or we can focus on this string of bosses to get to the end this week. Whereas a single raid can seem to burden you towards getting to the end at times. Have you considered maybe having a single raid where if you have progressed through you have progressed through 2 sides of the dungeon, like with heroics, you have defeated both of these 2 bosses. Later on, you can simply progress through one side to get to the end boss and maybe have a little more time to work on him without having to slug through as many bosses week after week.
We're actually talking about that, and it came up because something we haven't really talked about with looking for raid is, so for Dragon Soul's 8 bosses, but the way looking for raid works is you don't choose all of Dragon Soul, because doing 8 bosses in one night, and looking for raid, that's a very long time commitment. So
big commitment.
It's a huge commitment. So it actually breaks it up. It does actually break it up into two halves. There's the first 4 bosses, and if you beat the last boss of those 4, you get the big battle reward. And same thing, after you've beaten those, you can choose the second half, and then it breaks it up. And again, trying to keep the content to smaller chunks. So along with that, potentially, if we're going to end up building in those doors, those back doors, Karazhan had the back door that was halfway up, and that's something I think we're starting to think more about the logistics of getting raids through, and that's something that might happen in the future.
That's it. I got to keep moving. I can't.
My infection. I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Preston Wolf, my fellow tank. He couldn't be here because he had to get eye surgery. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, you guys. We got about 5 minutes, so just enough time for a couple more questions.
At last year's BlizzCon and all throughout Cataclysm, you hinted and showed a bunch of artwork for Abyssal Maw Raid, but never released it. Do you have any plans, and what happened to that?
We don't have any plans to release Abyssal Maw Raid at this point. What Abyssal Maw was it was a raid we were talking about doing for Cataclysm that was going to fit into Vashir, and it ended up, it turned out that the storyline that we were telling within that raid and the boss that we were going to use didn't fit with where we were going for the patch cycle. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with it or we were trying to not do it on purpose. It just ended up not fitting. We ended up having better ideas for some other stuff we wanted to do, so we actually lost all that. The concept art is about as far as we had gotten on it was concept, which we showed at BlizzCon last year. All that was just basically throwaway work at that point. But from a story perspective, we've kind of moved on from Cataclysm, so I don't think we're going to go back to it. But that's what happened. We just ended up not using it because we had something better.
Thank you.
All right, for your new dungeon challenges, you're going to be reducing people's item level to a certain level. I wanted to know how you were going to handle the secondary stats like hit and expertise, since those also get lowered, and people just take those to the caps and then they stop. So the lower geared people are still going to be at their caps, whereas the higher geared people, they're just going to get that flat chopped off the top, and will actually suffer the DPS loss from that.
That's a good point, and that's something we'll certainly have to work out. There's a lot of other like little details like that, like how do we handle trinkets.
We have top men working on a solution for that.
Very much so. We have faith in these top men.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
In other words, don't worry.
Hey,
Okay, real quick, one more, guys.
Hi, what's going on? I was just wondering how in Oldar and Heroic Lich King, like when you did Zero Light and you did Heroic Lich King, you would get Invincible and you would get the no head mount. It was 100% on hard mode. But in Firelands, you guys made normal mode people get the Firehawk mount, and it made people like who got Firelord. It was just kind of like a bummer that you can see like these noobs or whatever riding around on mounts that you get to kind of work for to get it, Like do you plan on like continuing doing that, or do you want to just give these awesome mounts to people who don't deserve it?
Oh.
I think.
Goodness. Now, on Heroic, you did get them every single time you killed him, and on Normal, I don't think that was the case. So, you were rewarded more, but, as far as actual, like...
And it's a different color.
Oh, it's a different color. Yeah, so...
That's part of the reason with Raid Finder that we're going to be separating out so that the mounts like that are only going to come from Normal and Heroic and aren't going to come from Raid Finder, because Raid Finder is kind of what we're looking at as an intro to raiding for most people. That's why, like we were talking about earlier, all those prestige items are going to stay in Normal and Heroic modes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. That's it for Q&A.
Thanks,
guys.